Hello and welcome to Straight Talk. I'm Ayşe Süberker. What started as peaceful protests against the Syrian regime in March 2011 soon escalated into a full-blown multi-sided civil war. The conflict saw Russia and Iran support Bashar-al Assad's government, while NATO and several Gulf Arab states backed the opposition forces to varying degrees. The UN says since the Syrian war broke out, thousands of people have been killed, while more than 10 million others have been displaced. And its new report points out that violence across the country has reached a new high since 2020, when Russia and Turkiye brokered a ceasefire after clashes between the warring sides in the Idlib province. Ankara vows to maintain what's called a safe zone on the Syrian side of the border and has carried out operations against the US-backed YPG, a wing of the PKK terrorist group. Turkey also hosts more than 3.5 million Syrian refugees displaced by the conflict. In the past years, the Syrian civil war hasn't made the international headlines as much as before, as the focus has shifted to other conflicts, such as the Russian invasion of Ukraine and the conflict in Gaza. And now to discuss the 13-year-long Syrian war, joining me now from Istanbul is Ammar Kaf. He is the Executive Director of Omran Center for Strategic Studies. And Tarık Oğuzlu, he is a professor at Istanbul Aydın University. A warm welcome to you both, and thanks for joining me on Straight Talk. So, Ammar, 13 years on since the Syrian war, civil war broke out. What are we looking at right now, and how has the war evolved in these past years?
Well, the civil uprising by the Syrian people have gone through several phases, obviously, throughout the 13 years. It has been transformed into a civil war, but then later also into a regional international intervention into the Syrian territories. And so what we have today, after 13 years, is a fragmented Syrian territory that has multiple actors, local actors, also many rogue actors, non-state actors, as well as international military presence on the ground and in the air. What we have today politically is a stalemate, is a broken political process that has been stagnant and has stopped any developments for the past 2 years now.
So, Tarık, what was one of the turning points that led Western powers to give up on their policy to topple the Assad regime? And in that, what kind of a role did Iran and Russia play?
I think before answering this question, let me also underline another very important geopolitical consequences of developments on the ground. Syria used to be a geopolitical player in the past, but after the Arab Spring began, Syria has fast become a kind of geopolitical playground for many intra-regional and extra-regional actors. As we all remember, in the very early days of the Arab Spring in Syria, the civil war in Syria, the international community was full of overconfidence, thinking that the regime in Damascus would soon come to an end, and any Muslim Brotherhood affiliated government will be installed in Damascus. And international actors, in particular the United States and other leading Western actors, were quite hopeful for this outcome. But soon they had come to the conclusion that this was simply a kind of self-fulfilling prophecy. So they had to change their approach from doing everything possible to dethrone Assad from power and investing their intention and attention to fighting ISIS forces beginning in 2014. One of the red lines in this particular episode is the crisis that took place in August 2013. The Americans were very much clearly saying that if Assad regime uses chemical weapons against opposition forces, America will do everything to make this not possible, but they couldn't keep their promises. And since that time, the credibility of Americans in the region has declined to a significant extent. And there are many other consequences as well.
So that's actually when Russia and Iran come in, Ammar. So how have their indirect involvement in Syria's civil war pushed Turkey to revisit its policies?
I mean, I believe at some point the U.S., since the chemical weapon attack deal, many countries retracted as a result of the Obama administration changing its position from regime change into behavioral change, into backing up on all of its promises. And so that led many countries to face the challenges on their own. And one of them has been primarily Turkey, Turkey as well, trying to face the aftermath, the massive, I mean, internally displaced people. You have at least 7 million people inside Syria that have internally been forcefully pushed out of their homes. And then you have close to 3.5 million at least inside Turkey. And now in the safe zone that Turkey protects, there's close to 5 million people. So Turkey today actually manages more of the Syrian population than the Syrian government in Damascus. And so it has a lot of security challenges. It has a lot of domestic economic challenges here. And the worst is there's no light at the end of the tunnel. And then Turkey and other regional countries are left to deal with the aftermath without any light at the end in terms of refugee return, in terms of resettlement, in terms of stability, in terms of funding, at least, to support those programs for refugees.
So, Tarek, what do you think? I mean, has Turkey's European partners lived up to their commitments and helped Ankara to deal with the humanitarian and economic consequences of the civil war?
Of course, Turkey and the European Union countries have come soon to the conclusion that they have to find a solution to this migration problems. Otherwise, internal peace and stability, not only in Turkey, but also in European countries, will be under challenge. So they did everything possible to coordinate their efforts. Of course, during this process, we were not on the same page every time. But also let me tell you that the U.S. involvement in Syrian civil war has negatively impacted Turkey's relations with the United States, just for the main reason that whereas the Americans have been supporting YPG forces against ISIS, from Turkey's own perspective, the elimination of the regime in Damascus has always become the number one geopolitical goal.
Yes.
And we also know that Turkey's internal and territorial integrity has somehow come under challenge due to growing Kurdish activism in northern Syria. And that's why Turkey had to organize numerous military operations in northern part of the country.
Yes.
We call some of those operations as you all know, that Euphrates Shield, Olive Branch, or Peace Spring operations. And Syrian presence in Turkey has also caused important sociological and political, in particular, negative consequences of Turkish politics. This is another negative side effect of the war in Syria. But maybe there is an important positive aspect in this particular sense, because for a long period of time, Turkey pursued an idealistic and normative foreign policy in Syria, hoping that many things will become much better. But we had to come to the conclusion that this is a kind of dream. So we had to change, Turkish foreign policy orientation from an idealistic one to a realistic one over the last 3 years.
So, Ammar, what do you make of the U.S. presence in the east of the Euphrates? I mean, what keeps the American forces stationed in that particular region? I mean, does the region still risk descending into a chaos if the U.S. pulls out?
Well, I mean, the threat here in northeast Syria is the Iranian presence along the border with Iraq, the Iranian presence along the Euphrates Shield on the west side towards the regime. And so the unfortunate thing is that the U.S. presence, their presence is causing a security risk to the region because of their support to the non-Syrian elements and the non-Syrians of the PKK. And at the same time, they're also at least partially, if not fully, blocking the full takeover of the Iranian militias of these regions. And so it's a very problematic presence. But at the same time, their withdrawal might, if it's not done properly, if it's done like the Afghanistan withdrawal, it might also cause some further refugees, actually. I mean, further refugees that might flee because as a result of the regime takeover, or actually more of the Iranians. And if you look at the map, the Iranians have really encircled all of the areas in the northeast.
So, Tarek, in the meantime, how do you think the Syrian president managed to normalize its relations with several Arab nations? I mean, what was the driving force behind that?
I think it's a very important topic we have to deal with. This not only concerns Syria's relations with other Muslim majority countries in the region, but also with Turkey as well. So many of those countries came to the conclusion that Assad will going to remain in Damascus because of the help they got from Iran, because of the help they got from Russia. They had managed to somehow control or minimize the threats emanating from the opposition circles. Even Turkey had come to the conclusion that there is only one way to get rid of this problem in Syria. We should increase our cooperation with Iranians and Russians within the framework of Astana peace process, for example, rather than hoping any help from the West. So Turkish authorities have also changed in terms of their way of dealing with the crisis in the region. So Assad, Syria has made some peace with the countries in the region. It was reaccepted to the Arab League, as we all know that. Maybe this will pave the way for finding an everlasting solution to the crisis. We have to wait and see how it evolves.
So, Amar, what do you think throughout these years has Assad become less dangerous than Daesh in the eyes of the Western powers as well as regional countries?
I mean, so far, Assad has not been a stabilizing actor in the regional system, and the regional system itself is in revision. And each of those countries in the Gulf or in the surrounding countries are reviewing their foreign policies post-Ukraine and post-Russian presence. And no one wants to create a new enemy, Iran or Russia, in the region. So everyone is opening good relations with those, or China even for that matter. Opening good relations with them because that will further stabilize the region. Whether Syria will be stabilized is another question. And I think so far, Bashar al-Assad has not been playing by the regional textbook of stabilization and has not been reciprocating the hands that have been extended to him to, first of all, to re-engage. And so far, the Arab normalization has not been a game changer. So far, Assad has not been willing to fight PKK, has not been willing to create conducive conditions for return of refugees. So far, he has continued actually the forced displacement. Today, we are witnessing the largest number of migrations out of Damascus and out of areas that have been supportive to the government of Syria. And so those individuals have been now fleeing. And so there's a huge challenge today in Damascus of a failed state, an undeclared failed state that is not able to provide security to its southern border, neither to its northern border with Turkey.
All right, gentlemen, unfortunately, we are out of time. Thank you very much for joining me on Straight Talk.